And I think at times we've probably kind of got that wrong, and we've let particularly our own internal debates overtake kind of everything else that we have to talk about, and we've kind of lost the plot a bit on talking about the most important stuff.
Well, let's do it now. Can we talk about Judges?
Whether other people would agree it's the most important is interesting.
I think, we're seeing a resonance, a revival of interest in these stories, because they kind of, whether you believe in the metaphysical side of it or not, they have the narrative enables you to understand the world in a way that data kind of just doesn't quite cut it, I'm afraid. Data's got its role, and in my profession it's very important, but when you're navigating complexity as an individual, you need stories to kind of help guide you, even if you don't know they're guiding you. And so we are seeing a recognition of that again, perhaps. And what's interesting to me is that you've taken a particular interest in the Old Testament versus the New Testament. I'm not saying you're not interested in the New Testament, but and particularly in Judges and Ruth. And I thought it'd just be a good opportunity. If people don't know it, I didn't know about it.
No, most people don't, so even people who go to church regularly.
Let's start with Judges. Let's take it in order. I know that Judges came first and Ruth came second. That's at least what's the start. Let's talk about the book of Judges. What happened? What is it about?
So in the story, it's part of what's called the histories in the Old Testament. So kind of talking about the origins of Israel, kind of spiritually as much as in any other way. And so it tells the story of the people of Israel arriving into the Promised Land and starting to settle, cohabiting with the initial inhabitants and trying to become a thing.
So it's after Moses.
It's after
Moses.
Before
David.
Come out of Egypt, kind of, come out of the desert, try to find space. You need to remember this is an agricultural society. If you don't have land, you die because you don't get food. So trying to find space, a lot of the good space is already taken in the land, and they're settling, they're having skirmishes with the local populations. But they're also trying to start to gel as a nation. I mean, nation is a bit of an anachronistic term, but, what does it mean to be Israel? Because Israel was a concept, but actually concept and reality often don't match. So there's something really interesting for me in terms of identity, in terms of the struggle between the ideals we strive for and the reality of life on the ground, and the stuff that gets in the way of the ideals, and what it means to live together as a community. And Judges it's messy. I mean, it's one of the messiest books of the Bible. It's got some of the most terrible stories in the Bible as well, which I like, because it says this is real life. Faith isn't about pie in the sky when you die. It's about how do we make sense of where we are? How do we make sense of who we are? How do we find our way into a world that is never going to be perfect, but where there is hope nonetheless? And that's part of the message of Judges for me. And there's great stories. Everybody's flawed in the book of Judges, just about. And there's an exploration of leadership, what it means to lead, and the Achilles heels of leadership. So we have series of leaders, most of whom have got serious issues. But there's almost a compassionate look at those issues that,
in the brutality. Almost.
In the brutality of it, often you see a thread of why it is that those people became who they are. There's also a thread in Judges that's about the joint responsibility of people and leaders. So Israel chooses its leaders. It's not quite democracy, but neither is it autocracy, and there's no kind of kingship passing on to your children. And there is a sense in which the people get the leaders they deserve, and leaders are able to do what they do because people give them the power to do that. So there's something about, which often we don't talk very much about in Western society, but that actually you can't just blame leaders and make them scapegoat. There's a joint responsibility for the life of the nation.
And there's a kind of cycle, isn't there, where you're in the Promised Land, you're all believers, and things are going well, and then the judge dies, and then the followers start becoming idolatry.
Yeah.
They lose their faith.
They do their
They
stuff.
follow Baal, and then they descend, and then they end up becoming oppressed, and then another judge comes along and frees them, and then they start again, and it's kind of goes. And I was like, oh, here we go again. Oh, here we go again. It was kind of quite interesting. What is there something in that cycle that must talk to human nature kind of through and through?
Yeah, it's the usual. It's the Mark Twain thing, isn't it? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and there's that sense of. I think there is something about very early on in the book that talk about the new generation did not know the Lord, and it's that sense that actually every generation has got to learn how to live for themselves. They've got to learn faith for themselves. They've got to learn, and often that's done through mistakes and problems and issues and suffering, and we don't really like that as human beings. But there is that constant. Well, you have things to learn from those who came before. But equally, each new generation has got to learn for themselves. You can't just take something ready-made from the past and apply it in the present.
Because you go through a period of suffering. It's similar to that kind of historical trope or cycle of clogs on the way up, silk slippers on the way down. And what is interesting is that you get through this period of suffering, and then you arrive, and then all of a sudden you forget the next generation forget the lessons, and they have to go through it themselves. Can you talk about Deborah and Jael? What happened there within the Book of Judges?
So Deborah, the story of Deborah, this amazing story about a woman who was leading Israel. People don't like that. I think a lot of commentators have found Deborah really difficult because they don't know what to do with her, because she's a woman leading in a man's world. And the text doesn't bat an eyelid. It's like, she's a woman, she's a judge, and she doesn't do anything wrong, unlike many of the other judges. And that's quite extraordinary at this point. What I find interesting about Deborah is she leads together with a man called Barak, who's subordinate to her, but she doesn't try and take over his job. He's the leader of the army, and he doesn't try to take over her job, which is to give advice, to hear from God. She's the brains. Yeah. And it's like there's no sense of competition. There's this sense of they work together. Often commentators haven't liked that and have tried to say, no, Deborah was only a leader because Barak didn't step up, which is clearly not true, because Deborah was a leader before Barak even enters on the scene. So there's something quite extraordinary about this story of a woman in a patriarchal world who just leads and does a great job, and that's it. And then you've got the story of Yael, which is she's not, so Israel is at war, basically. They were oppressed by the local people. The local army of Canaanites kind of tries to overrun Israel when Israel rises against them. And then you've got this liminal figure who's Yael, whose husband is an ally of the Canaanites. And she, as a woman in a country at war, she's at risk. She knows, what happens to women in war is the same the world over. And then the enemy general, the Canaanite general, arrives, and she has to make a choice. What's going to happen? Are the Israelites going to win? If the Israelites win and she's helped the Canaanites, she'll be at risk. But if she refuses to help the Canaanite, what is he going to do to her?
Yeah. So he's arrived, he's run away from battle. It's Sisera, is it?
Yeah,
is that how you say
it?
Sisera. He's run away from battle, and he's gone back to, he's come to some tent.
Some tents, and he's hoping to be helped. And she lures him, so it's with her feminine guiles, as some would say. It's quite a spicy story. It's got lots of sexual innuendos. Yeah. She lures him, gets him to sleep, and then kills him with a tent peg.
And a hammer. It's quite
and a hammer and a tent peg. And it's quite graphic and it's quite violent. And again, we have a non-typical woman who actually she's non-Israelite, and she's a woman, and she's one of the reasons why Israel is delivered from oppression. So that's a really interesting story, because it collapses lots of categories. It collapses some of the ideas we have about gender, but it also says, well, actually, God works with everybody. And it's that sense of God is on the side of the oppressed rather than God is on the side of this tribe or that people, and that there is that sense that faith is about faith in a God who cares about those who are vulnerable, rather than faith is about having a guarantee for what I want.
And what can we learn from Samson, who's also in that
Samson is a complete disaster. He's a man-child who cannot control his impulses. Again, there is something really interesting about. So I'm interested in identity and how identity works. And in the story of Samson, there is this sense of he's part of Israel, but he resists, and Israel is, in that uneasy relationship in the middle of Canaan. But Samson
he's got superhuman strength, is that right?
But he's irresistibly attracted by everything Canaanite, particularly women. And so is he a leader of Israel, or is he a leader for Canaan? How do you do the right thing? And can you do the right thing by mistake, which is what happens with Samson? He kind of ends up in the right place, but not by making the right kind of choices. He does have superhuman strength, but he starts to trust in himself and think that, all the things he does are because he's brilliant and he's a great person, rather than seeing that his strength is given to him by God, rather than
and these are all lessons today.
Possess. Yes.
Like you see these, whether you're an influencer or a successful business person, stroke depressed person when it comes to the evenings, because you kid yourself about your own skills that you think are innate, but they may actually be God-given, or may have a purpose beyond showing off or collating money.